what I learned over the years is that they don't do what we do, right? The further you are away from a problem, the easier it is to solve. So in their mind, they're like, I need this. Let me call Linda and let me get this. Let me get this information that I'm looking for. They may not realize it's not part of what they're asking for. And if we just do it, we have diminished our own value.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest helps service businesses design clear, boundary-honoring service packages that prevent burnout, attract the right clients, and build long-term wealth. Linda Hunt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you, and
Yeah.
I love the topic, and I think our listener will as well.
Good.
And maybe let's start off with a little bit about you leading up to what you're doing today.
Okay, so back in the late 90s, I left corporate. I'm a corporate dropout. And I started one of the first remoting accounting services business. Like, this is before the internet was even a thing, right? Like, It did not support a remote accounting services. And learned a lot, right? Like, coming from corporate, you have a lot of support structures. And when you become a small business owner, you're basically wearing all the hats and doing everything. So while I was really, really good at seeing the systems and seeing what's going on and kind of helping business owners with all of that back end, I had a lot on my plate, and I ended up making a lot of mistakes. I think all of us make, maybe I should only speak for myself, but I made a lot of mistakes, as a small business owner. And one of them was around pricing and packaging my services and how I held out my shingle, so to speak, how I saw myself and what I was really providing for the client. So all of that got me, I grew my business. I got, quote unquote, burnt out. Then I started talking with other professionals in the industry and realizing they were having the same struggles. Started training and teaching them. And then I expanded that back into working with all service providers. So it's kind of, my passion is working with service providers and helping them get the distinction between who they are and the service they provide. Mm. So creating a lot of clarity around that. Once we can create clarity around that, then things become a little bit more easier. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I would say that we have our listeners, as I said, they would love this. They are going to love this topic. And I guess you talked about burnout. And I would say, we hear often that bookkeepers are saying yes to a lot of things. If they're starting out, we want clients.
Of course.
If we have clients, you get stuck in this, like, what happens if these clients leave, if I change things, do things differently? Mm-hmm. But then that's what I guess leads to burnout for many of them, and maybe for yourself. And you can maybe tell a little bit of your story there.
Yeah.
But let's maybe dig into that and how we can maybe change this up.
Great question, because what you alluded to is exactly what happened. I didn't have a standardized process when I started working for someone. So I was going in and kind of becoming or saying yes to whatever it is that they needed. And as the service provider, we are the experts, right? So accounting and bookkeeping services have a common thread. I'm going to call that the vanilla ice cream, right? Every business has accounts receivable. Maybe not every business has, accounts payable. Not every business may have accounts receivable, but they have some kind of sale coming in, right? So there's standard things that we're doing across the board for everyone. What I learned is that you have to go in with a process, okay? You have to go in with a standard way that you deliver your services. This is one component of this. You have to go in with a standard way that you deliver your services so that you can ensure quality, right? Because a lot of us, right? And I think this is typical of people in the accounting profession, is that we want to provide good work. We want to do things the right way. And sometimes most times, we're going into a situation where process does not exist. The business owner might have grown fast, they might have patched things together, and it's not obvious to those business owners that they need to architect their financial systems the same way they're architecting, what it is they're delivering. So an example of that would be, we were working with a medical spa. They had a lot of locations, but when I think when we started working with them, they had 3. We go in there, the bookkeeper was approving, we took over that role. The bookkeeper was supposed to approve the hours for all the employees at the 3 different locations. And my first question was, how is the bookkeeper doing that? They don't know the schedule. They don't know if the people were there. How do they know the hours are correct? So that's a prime example of how there's not a process in place because the business didn't realize they needed to have a financial control in place, right? So one thing we have to do is go in with, okay, yes, I can help you, but here's what we need to implement, right? Then the second part of that is we also have to work to our capacity, right? Oftentimes we get into burnout because we are saying yes to everything. We're getting scope creep, and we aren't billing for those extras. And that's a lot of times that kind of murkies the waters. So you're dealing with businesses where process doesn't exist. And then you're saying yes to all this because you don't want the client to go away. You don't want to lose the business. We like recurring business, right? That is our nature. And at the same time, we're working beyond our true capacity. So we kind of have to look at all 3 of those things.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Bookkeepers are often the unsung heroes of the business world. You're the ones keeping the engine running, but you don't always get the recognition you deserve. I know how vital you are to business success, and the team at Bill knows it too. That's why they're hosting Bookkeeper Appreciation Week from March 30th to April 3rd, dedicated to recognizing the real work you do and giving you the tools you can actually use to free up time for more strategic work. So mark your calendars for March 30th and get ready for 5 days of practical resources delivered straight to your inbox, plus live CPE-eligible webinars. You'll discover what bookkeepers are navigating right now, advisory work, pricing, and AI, along with proven strategies they're already using. Trust me, you're going to want to check this out. Register now at bill.com/successful bookkeeper. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you think about it, it's like you say yes to little things. Those little things add up, just like the pennies add up to dollars quickly.
Right.
And always the one that I know I do, and I know it's a human condition, is we overestimate what we can accomplish.
Yes.
And it's like this, our brain is not good at trying to manage all of that. And that's like how much is how much. And you said something as well, which is, I think in every person's life, is what's good enough as well. Like you think, oh, I'm going to help them. I'm going to say yes. Even in their own work that they do, it's like, well, I want to please them. Well, what's the limit to pleasing? Like, oh, I pleased them today. How am I going to please them tomorrow? It can be this stacking effect that happens for people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the first thing that I recommend folks do is calculate what I call their minimum aligned price. And your minimum aligned price is the rate, okay? It's your floor. It is the rate that you need to be charging so that it sustains your life and your business. And this calculation is very, very simple. It takes into consideration true client-facing time, okay? And it allows for time where you are, maybe taking time off, maybe working on your own business, thinking strategically about implementing that new tool so that you can, help a client, right? We oftentimes, I find in our profession that we're doing and we're multitasking from this client to that client to another client. And that is a talent in of itself. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit that we are one of the industries that can do that and do that very, very well. Okay. But at the same time, it also blinds us to, it gives us a blind spot, not blinds us, but it gives us a blind spot that we're not sitting back and thinking about our own business. Even if we're solo providers, we have to step back and say, okay, full-time hours are 2,080 in a year. I want to take off 3 weeks vacation and, let's just say I want to take off 2 weeks vacation and like 5 days of holidays, whatever that is, right? So you take that out of the 2,080. But then you also have to realize, so then you're left with, I'm not going to do the math right now, but let's just say you're left with 1,900 hours. Out of those 1,900 hours, how many of those hours are client facing, right? So you've got to get down to that true capacity. Let's just say 75% of that is, okay? 75% is client facing. That divided against what your desired salary and the dollar amount that you need to run your business, that is the floor that you must be charging. Okay, so that's the base. So if I'm working with anyone and we're going to look at creating packages that don't burn us out, that's the first thing we're doing, because that formula truly accounts for capacity and allows you to sit back, lets your revenue come in steadily, right? So, and you're not hustling, you don't have to constantly take another client or add things on. That's step number one. And then the second thing that we look at is, how do we deliver our services in a way that is structured and ensures quality, right? And then once you have that workflow, then you're adding on maybe some automations or things like that. But we have to anchor ourselves in our true capacity and a consistent way of delivering our services.
So true. And I'd love to hear some of the cases where how do they get stuck on implementing some of these things? Because when you think about it, it does sound very simple, right?
It does.
But there's lots of stuff that goes wrong.
Correct. Lots of stuff that goes wrong. Right. So oftentimes what's happening is, and I'll speak for I'll start with my own experience. I was on that hamster wheel, right? So I'm on the hamster wheel of, I had just started out, so I'm saying yes to all of the clients, and I'm kind of learning as I'm going, like what people want, what people need, what I'm aligned with offering, what I'm not aligned with offering. And then, basically I'm working all of the time. And then I don't want to say I was missing deadlines, but you're kind of doing just enough, right, to meet that client deadline, and then depot over here and meet another client deadline. So I was on that hamster wheel of burnout. I remember just waking up one morning going, I can't do this anymore. This is worse than having a job, right? This is worse than having a job and them telling me I had to travel 95% of the time, right? I'd rather go do that than what I was doing, because I felt I didn't know how to get out of it, right? And that's an extreme. But I think oftentimes what's happening is that we don't have time to sit and think, right? Because we are part of the machine that keeps other businesses running. Okay, so accounting services is an active, every single day, it's like dirty laundry, right? There's always another dirty sock. So every single day, something's happening that might need attention. So you're right. How do we implement this? Because there are things that keep us from doing it. So we try to do too much. So the thing is, I sat back and I said, well, what's one thing I can do? Because I literally was exhausted. I couldn't do everything. And the first thing I did, and I think a lot of people do this now, and or maybe they don't, is I said, okay, I'm going to assign clients to a specific day of the week. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to assign clients to a specific day of the week. And then I'm only going to work on that. And I'm going to give them, say, I don't know, say I'm going to assign 2 hours to so-and-so because that's what I can do it. And then I turned off my email, right? That was controllable for me. And I think a lot of it was just getting rid of the noise, right? The external noise. But what I quickly learned was, oh my gosh, I was able to get in, work on that client, and it didn't take me 2 hours because I wasn't constantly interrupting myself or going back and forth. So that taught me compartmentalizing. And then I communicated. So I did that with a couple of clients, and then I communicated it to my clients. And I said, hey, while we will, check email, or if there was something crucial, like if a client had something crucial, depending on what we were doing for them, because my company acts as the accounting department, so we're kind of live accounting up to the minute. Whereas for the write-up services, they didn't care when we did it. But I let them know. I says, this is when we're going to, like, if you have a question, please reach out. But no, this is when we're going to be working on you. So my advice is you start with one thing, right? You do one thing that changes, and then that gives you some incremental time to then make the next change. All right. And the thing is, you don't want to, when you have that time, it was very tempting for me to try and go get another client. But what was the other thing that was happening at this time is I was overextended and I was undercharging. So I then had to pull back, right? Because I had a full client load, and yet I couldn't pay my bills sometimes, right? Because there wasn't enough money, and I was charging by the hour. And I said, okay, something here, this doesn't work. So what I learned is that while what I talked about before, MAP is your minimum aligned price, that doesn't necessarily translate the value of the services that you're providing. And we are providing a transformation. We are providing a result. And yes, it's accounting services, and there might be varying degrees of that, of what we're doing. It could be as simple as we're just doing reconciliations all the way through a month-end close for someone. Depending on what they've hired you to do is really the value. I don't want to say the value of it, but you want to create a package. I personally create my packages around the needs around the accounting cycle. So if someone wants us to, do everything on the daily transactions, prepare a month-end close, and then help them prepare for their CPA and their taxes, I put a package together on that, and it is based on it does have a time component, and you can't get away from a time component in our industry. There is a time component, right? But then you want your rate to reflect the value of the services that you're providing. So if we're providing full month-end close, let's just say my base rate is $50 an hour, and then, you add on top of that, right? And then you're creating a package, a flat rate fee for the entire year, and you divide that by 12. That's how we do it. That's how I do it.
Okay. And was that something that you implemented and it just worked right away, or did you have to go through some iterations?
Yeah. So I would say to you that it worked 80%. And then what I recognized was I went a little further, and I added another layer of consistency. So if someone wanted to work with us, right, and we did their bookkeeping for them once a week, so say we were touching their account once a week, it was basically a one time a week frequency. So I had a package that took that times 52 weeks. So basically, let's just say I used 4 hours, right? So the hours were 4 times 52, which were 100, whatever they are, 1,080 hours times our rate for that level of service. Then I added on and I said, okay, it takes us 3 hours to do a month-end close, 3 times 12. So that's how I built the packages. And once I started building the packages that way, adding it up at an annual basis and then dividing it by 12, that worked because it allowed me to allow for overages in some months and underages in other months, right? So it really did work out. Now, so I think I'm going to anticipate your next question. You're going to go, well, what happens if, they're scope creep or they're asking for other things? I had to teach myself how to recognize true scope creep. Because if they're asking for something, if a client's asking for a report and we could generate the report, very quickly and easily off of the system, I'm not going to charge them for something like that. But if they're coming back to us and saying, hey, I need you to do analysis of, I don't know, these travel accounts, right? Or the expense reports for so-and-so, that is not part of our work. That is not part of our scope. So then I would go back to them and say, love to help you with that. That looks like it's a special project. It's going to take us X, Y, and Z to do. And then even though you're in a recurring relationship, you can go back and charge extra for extra requests.
It's very interesting, and that wasn't the question, but I like the question.
Okay, that's the way I interpreted. Sorry.
No, it's good because I think people with scope creep, people talk about it all the time, and what is scope creep?
Yeah,
it can mean a lot of things. It can mean a lot
of things. Yeah, scope creep tiptoes
and even
in.
more
It does
difficult
not
when you have a team as well. Like someone can be asking the team to do things that, to the team member, it seems, well, I just do I do whatever the client wants, right? The client is always right. Get me this, do that, make this happen. Need, stops and starts in the system to make sure you're not bleeding.
Yeah, I think so that's the other thing that happened too. I will say that. And I remember I had to you have to educate your team. You have to educate your team on what's acceptable, scope creep, and when they need to raise their hand. And when I first started doing that, I mean, basically they were raising their hand on everything, but then they started to understand, like, okay, this is in the scope of work. This is outside the scope of work. Because I understand our workers, our team's mentality. They feel it's their responsibility to service. Yeah, to provide service. And as the business owner, we're sitting here going, yes, but at the same time, we're not employees. We're not at their disposal. There is a line where it's included and there's a line where it's not. And that's up to us. That's up to us to direct our team.
Yeah, and training around it, because we've all experienced where someone just gives you a flat no. It's how do you say no when it feels like you're saying yes to them, right?
Correct.
And that's it's training, right. And it's a bit of an art.
It is a bit of an art, and one of the things that we do is we don't put that pressure on the team member who is, let's just say they're our associate, right? Our bookkeeping associate or our bookkeeper. We don't put that pressure on them unless they say, oh no, I got it. I can go back and say no. If they feel confident enough to do that. But I also think it's a skill that you develop, right? You train them, you help them understand why it's not included and why they need to raise their hand and say, hey, I don't think this is included. You want them to recognize. They have two clients. We basically want our employees to think, or our team to have. They have two clients. They have us, and they have the client, right?
That's right.
And we've got to balance both. Yeah,
that's right. And there's revenue in the requests. So
yes, there's revenue.
You want the person that can translate a request into revenue.
Correct.
Which is, hey, we don't do that. Okay, move on. Or, let's check. Let me put you in with Linda here. And we can do that. No problem. But it's going to cost you, right?
Exactly. And it's not necessarily our team's job to do the selling.
No, for sure. And that's a big mistake in any business where service isn't trained on recognizing revenue opportunities in the process. It's like, I'm not able to do this. And it's like, oh, well, too bad for you. Or, hey, let me see if there's something we can do. Let me, talk to Linda here. And Linda gets on the call and says, what are you trying to accomplish? Understand the situation. That's a consultative selling approach, right?
Yeah,
opportunity.
And sometimes, I'm going to be honest with you, Michael, when I would get on the phone with them, and if it was something that I knew would take us an hour, And yes, I could have charged for it. So you use your judgment, and sometimes you do goodwill, right? And because the client's been with you, but you have to be able to let your team elevate it up so that you can make that choice, right?
Yes.
And at the same time, you let the client know, like, hey, this isn't included, but I want you to know we can do this relatively quickly. And this is how I caveat it. If it becomes a recurring request, I will have to include it in your, in the scope of services, and it will be charged for. That
And
type of
that's a critical piece. That's
yeah.
a critical piece because if someone asks for something, I need to get to A to B. If you just do A to B without any conversation, they don't know the value of A to B. But
Right.
it's like, oh wow, A to B is big, but
Right.
we're going to accommodate you here for this
Right.
go. But it's we're climbing
Yeah.
up a mountain here for you.
Yeah.
You get the goodwill is even worth more money, or not money, but more value.
No, and more
And
value in the relationship.
it's more value to the relationship, and that value may turn into revenue at some point.
Absolutely. Here's the other thing I want to highlight about scope creep is oftentimes our clients don't realize it's not included. It's not because they're not doing it to try and get something over on us or anything like that. What I've learned over the years is that they don't do what we do, right? The further you are away from a problem, the easier it is to solve. So in their mind, they're like, I need this. Let me call Linda and let me get this. Let me get this information that I'm looking for. They may not realize it's not part of what they're asking for. And if we just do it, we have diminished our own value, right? I don't care if you're a solo provider or you have a full-fledged team. It is our job to present ourselves as strategic partners to the businesses we work with. And I don't, let me caveat that because I don't want people to get scared by what I mean. What I really mean by that is we are providing a specific level of service, okay? And we know, like, if they're coming and they're asking you to be, act like a CFO, that's a very different skill set. But if they're asking you for something within your skill set, that is what I mean. It is our job to be a strategic partner with them and say, hey, I think you need X. And this is how I think we can help you, or they may need to go and hire an outsourced CFO. I mean, there were early on in my career, I did not have inventory experience. This is probably a better example of that. I did not have inventory experience, although I knew enough to be dangerous, right? And I knew a standard cost was needed, although I did not know how to get them there. What I did is I went to the client and I said, inventory is not right because I think X, Y, and Z. I recommend that we go to the CPA and maybe they can help us, or we find someone who can help us with inventory. That alone solidified my relationship with the client. They didn't, because we have to not be afraid of being replaced. I added value because I was looking at this and saying, I know this is incorrect. I know this is a big deal in your business, right? They had inventory. It had to be correct. And we got to a solution, right? So we cannot be afraid. If we don't know something, we have to raise our hands.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it has me thinking, and I'm curious of your take here, and maybe you're not sure, or what, it's so early, but I would imagine that with AI now, Chat GPT, Claude,
Yep.
being able to use that as a tool to help you add value, because it's not like you're going to go and get the answer completely, but
Right.
you're taking that use case
Yes.
and saying, what can we do here? What
Yeah.
are some, what are some ways? So I'd love to get your take, because that's also
Yeah.
probably based on your trajectory here. You've seen it all, and you're
I've seen a
seeing
lot.
probably a lot more of it. And that's a position of power, where you
Yeah.
have knowledge of the past, deep understanding, and now we're adding all of these new things. What's your
Yeah.
take from that angle?
I think AI used the correct way is an aid that can help us, right? I think our industry's been challenged with AI, coming into it for quite a few years, more before, or well before Chat GPT became, the norm to help you with your grocery list. And the thing is, we just have to look at what we're doing differently. So if we can get AI to help us analyze a P&L, right? You could upload a P&L into, Chat GPT and say, show me the weak areas. Show me this is say a service business that does X, Y, and Z. Show me the industry norms they should be operating in against. I mean, there's a bunch of different prompts. I probably should come up with a bunch of standard prompts, but you can use that to help you point things out. Now, mind you, we also want to automate. I think we want to consciously automate in ways that allows us to up-level our skills. Okay. So one of the focuses my firm's been taking is we are going in and looking at, I'm calling it the architecture, because there are so many systems now that don't communicate properly. And you could have 3 sets of AR, right? And you can have standard cost over here that they're pricing off of, yet there's not enough cash flow. So we do a series of evaluations. Once call it a strategic accounting systems review, which is all of the feeders into the accounting system. Another one we do is just a bookkeeping diagnostic of just kind of looking at the bookkeeping file and what their needs are and why the business owner might not feel their data is reliable. And then we also do a pricing reset. But if you allow AI to do the lift on getting transactions in a way where you can get visibility, one of our favorite tools is Double. I don't know if you've heard of it. It used to be Keeper.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we love Double. And Double, to me, gives you that visibility, right? It automates things to an extent. You still have to have a human eye on it. But what I've been noticing is our team is becoming more analytical, because the tool is allowing them to look at things and they're recognizing, oh, hey, this went up because, let me take a look at it in a different way. So they're behaving in different ways. So I think overall, it's a very choppy answer that I gave you, but I think AI is good. I think AI can help us. And I think it can up-level and I think there's an opportunity, right? We know the feeders that have to get into the accounting. We may not be, and I am not a tech guru. And somebody might be thinking, well, maybe she's good at tech. I'm not good at tech. All I know is I know that questions to ask, right? That gets you to good numbers. And so do most accounting professionals. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots there that can be helpful, and it's an area for all of our listeners to dig into. But the tools are evolving to give us more time to do the deep work that you probably 6 months ago or even a month ago. It's like, if only I had more time.
Yeah.
To do the deeper work, to do the more analytics, to go a little extra further with what the client really needs. And that's the big opportunity, is that what can be done to really lean into servicing the client and being their true advisor.
Being their true advisor. And I think that, Michael, scares some folks because they don't think of themselves as an advisor. I don't consider myself if somebody wants me to come in and analyze their cash flow, and tell them where they're going to be in 12 months. Can I prepare a cash flow forecast? Yes, I can. Am I the best person to be doing that? It's not my comfort zone. I don't really love it. I don't want to do it. And I'm not even comfortable enough to use AI to help me with that, right? It's like, because there's just a little too much risk in there, but where we can find the advisory capacity. Like, I am more comfortable in what I just described. Like, oh, I can look at your accounting system and tell you why you don't trust your numbers. So we all have that, right? We all have that within us. So we just have to sit back a little bit and say, well, okay, instead of spending my time entering these 10 journal entries, if I automated them, what else could I do and offer that's of value? And
Yeah.
sometimes that means talking to somebody else about it, because what we don't recognize, what we think is easy to us is a gift and a talent that we can sell to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a fantastic conversation so far. I'd love you to tell the listener a little bit about, maybe resources you have, other ways they can learn from you.
Sure. They can visit me at my website, SumSolutions.com. They are looking for some help on their pricing. If they're having difficulty, creating those packages, having a conversation with their clients about raising rates, we offer a pricing reset session. It's a one session diagnostic that they will walk over with clear deliverables. The other thing I'm probably going to be doing later this year is I used to teach the Bookkeeper's Business Blueprint, which was the business behind bookkeeping. And I'm probably going to resuscitate that and refresh it in a new way, probably later this year. So if anyone's interested in that, you can come and check it out. Just let me know. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get information on that. And I also have a book coming out called The Money Conversation. It's coming out actually in March 2026. And it is about how to raise your prices for service providers and have confident money conversations. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Now, there's some great resources for our listener. And Linda, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you for coming on the show and
Thank you for
sharing
having
some
me.
of the things that you've been working on and wisdom you've collected along the way.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure has been all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.